We like to think the world runs on a clear set of rules. But what if I told you that the most powerful forces are actually the ones hidden in the fine print? Today, we're going to dive into some of those paradoxes, these strange, counterintuitive systems that are secretly running our global economy. So let's start with a mystery. We're talking about these massive steel shipping containers, right? The backbone of global trade. Each one is worth thousands of dollars. So why in the world would anyone just dump them in a field to rust? The answer? Well, it reveals a fundamental crack in the way our world does business. All right, so here's what we're digging into. We've got 3 unbelievable stories, and each one pulls back the curtain on a hidden flaw in our world. We'll start with why thousands of perfectly good shipping containers get left to rot. Then we'll solve the puzzle of why the world's biggest oil producer still has to import so much oil. And finally, we'll track a ghost fleet of airplanes in a real-life tale of international intrigue. Okay, this first paradox, it's about a system that isn't broken. It's just working completely in reverse. What you're about to see is the physical, real-world evidence of a global economy that is totally out of balance. And it all starts with this number right here. In 2023 alone, China exported $823 billion more in goods than it imported. That creates this colossal, one-way river of products flowing out of China, all of them packed neatly into those steel containers. But what happens when that river of stuff reaches America? Well, the US imports way more than it exports back to China. So let's just imagine for every 10 containers that show up at a US port, only 4 of them will actually find goods to carry on the trip back. And the other 6, they just get stranded. And here is the system flaw, the core of the paradox. See, it costs about $3,000 to ship an empty container all the way back to China. But it only costs $2,000 for China to manufacture a brand new one. When you look at the raw numbers, it's actually cheaper to build a new box than to retrieve the old one. And the impact is just staggering. Millions of perfectly good containers are abandoned, creating these vast junkyards all across America. So, the next time you see those stacks of shipping containers piled up near a port, just remember they aren't just empty boxes. They are a physical symptom of a global economy where the scales are so tilted it's literally more logical to throw away a valuable asset than to just send it home. All right, let's move on to our next paradox. And believe me, it's a big one. Pretty much everyone thinks the problem with oil is all about supply. Who has it and who doesn't. But the truth is way more complex, and it has almost nothing to do with how much oil a country actually has in the ground. Just look at this for a second. The United States is the single largest producer of oil in the entire world, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia. And yet it's also the world's second largest importer of oil. It's like owning the biggest wheat farm on the planet but still buying most of your bread from the neighbor. How is that even possible? Well, the answer isn't about how much oil America has. Nope. It's hidden in 3 pretty surprising factors: some mismatched chemistry, broken logistics, and a forgotten century-old law that's still causing chaos today. First up, chemistry. Think of it like this. American oil refineries are like coffee makers designed for coarse grounds. But the oil America produces is mostly light crude, which is like superfine espresso grounds. It just doesn't work well. To retrofit those refineries would cost over $200 billion. So the business logic is simple. Sell your valuable light crude on the global market for a high price, and then just import the cheaper heavy crude that your machines are already built for. And to make things even worse, there aren't enough pipelines to even get that American oil from Texas to the refineries on the East Coast. It creates this kind of oil island within the country itself. And the final nail in the coffin? It's a law from way back in World War I called the Jones Act. This law says that any goods shipped between 2 U.S. ports must be on a ship that is U.S. built, U.S. owned, and U.S. crewed. Well, because U.S. ships and labor are incredibly expensive, this law actually makes it cheaper for a refinery in New York to import oil all the way from Africa than to just ship it up from Texas. A law that was meant to protect the nation is now forcing it to depend on others. It's wild. And now for our final story. This one plays out less like an economic textbook and more like something from an international thriller. It's all about how a country under some of the world's tightest sanctions can get its hands on advanced American technology pretty much in plain sight. The country in question is Iran. The technology? A fleet of Boeing 777 passenger jets. US sanctions are specifically designed to make this kind of transaction impossible. So the question is, how on earth did Iran pull it off? They did it by exploiting the cracks in the global system. It was basically a multi-country shell game. The journey began in an Australian aircraft boneyard. 5 used Boeing 777s were bought by a US shell company. From there, they were moved through China, then re-registered to a fake company in Madagascar to hide from US oversight, and then flown to Cambodia, a country with pretty lax aviation rules. And for the final move, they filed a flight plan for Kenya. But once they were in the air, they switched off their transponders, vanished from radar, and diverted to land secretly in Iran. So what's the loophole? What makes this whole scheme possible? It's an international law called the Chicago Convention. And it basically says that as long as 2 countries aren't at war, one cannot deny the other's civilian aircraft the right to use its airspace or land. So once Iran had the planes, despite all the sanctions, they were legally free to fly them internationally. America's hands were completely tied. So let's tie all this together, shall we? From rusting containers to oil tankers and ghost planes, each one of these stories, as different as they are, reveals a very similar truth about the world that we've all built. Look, we've built these incredibly complex global systems for trade, logistics, and international law. But these systems are just full of loopholes and unintended consequences. For the really sophisticated players out there, the real game isn't about following the rules. It's about finding and then exploiting the cracks between them. These paradoxes, they're not mistakes. They're actually features of our modern world. They are the hidden engines quietly shaping our reality every single day. And it kind of leaves you with a question, right? If these are just the flaws that have become visible enough for us to see, what other invisible systems are at work right now, directing the flow of money and power all around the globe?